Wait, one more minute.
You're perfectly okay. We're just going to let people join us, and then you can get started. Okay, I am going to turn it over to you, Emma. I am going to mute myself, and then
Yep.
I'll let you go.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Thank you all for tuning in to my senior exhibition artist talk. This show is called Introspection. My name is Emma McKay Ryan, in case you didn't know. I am a senior here at Doane University, majoring in fine arts with a professional emphasis, and this show is in coordination with my professional practices course and kind of that professional emphasis in leading me into graduate school and professional career as an artist. So my artist statement, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. You kind of look over it. I'm very focused on drawing, and this whole series uses color pencil. I really wanted to focus on self-growth and self-identity throughout this series. I think that's something that I've really come about myself within art and drawing and kind of embracing who I am through art. It also is something that I've been a TA and a teaching assistant, and I've kind of seen through everybody, through myself, through my friends, that challenges, that struggle of maybe that first semester isn't always the easiest, but I think in the end, people kind of find their way. But I really wanted to show the cycle of going through that growth and that evolving self-identity. Sometimes the narrative is a little bit hidden in some of these. I think until you see the title, you'll kind of understand a little bit more. But I think that is also a reflection and mirrors reality in the way that people are and represent themselves. It is impossible to truly understand what everyone else is going through and has gone through with their experiences in those relationships. So I think making connections at Doane has also kind of brought up that that realization of knowing what other people are maybe have gone through. Going into my influences, I kind of have a range of influences. They're not all one medium artist or whatnot. So I kind of have a color pencil, technical artist, and then Jeanette Fish is a oil painter. She works very well with lots of fruits and reflective material. She does some beautiful glass work, and then also her plastic work is really what I was looking at when kind of looking at her technique and style within that reflective material. And then Sophie Rambert, her figural drawings are gorgeous. She really captures the movement of the body within the muscles and the figure within how the bone structure and whatnot. I think that's super important to be able to do. Okay, so this is the first drawing, and I really had a struggle of kind of what that idea of what I was going to do in the very beginning. And so the first thing I had done is done a self-portrait, which is a very vulnerable thing to do, I think, but faces of what I had previously been working on quite a bit. So going into that was kind of that next step. And then also incorporating the use of plastic in that highly reflective material. As you can see kind of in that video it's a time lapse of the initial, it's like the initial progress. And I really tried to not make them look like mannequins in the way that I wanted them to have fleshy tones and have all of that blues and greens and pinks and yellows kind of in that flesh. I think dermatology is always something I've been really interested in. I wanted to be a dermatologist for a long time. So incorporating kind of that interest in skin and that lifelike structure was very intriguing for me to be able to do within my drawings. Here's that piece up close. It is titled Stifling. I created it in September of 2021. You can kind of zoom in a little bit. You can see where I've super fine highlighted those areas within the plastic. I think using the plastic as a tool of abstraction and mark making has been very interesting to me. Sometimes it's not exact. It's never going to be exact as the photo as much as I'd like it to be, but having that ability and creativity to kind of make these little lines and those marks within the highlights has been very fun. Zoom in. This one is pliable. And something that I really wanted to do was incorporate complementary colors. I really enjoy the way that they complement each other within the ways that they create shadows and kind of that looking at the red plastic bag and then the green apple. I think initially I was looking at that and I was like, oh, it's a green apple. But no, there's so much, there's that brown, there's the red like reflecting onto the apple. And then also you have that red bag that is then reflecting onto the skin, creating the skin to be this almost bright pinkish coral color, which is something that was kind of a little bit hard in the beginning. And then also within this is the strong use of diagonal composition. That is something that I have constantly trying to been doing, is adding that level of movement within each piece by having that strong diagonal composition. I think pieces that have that strong diagonal composition are sometimes more intriguing, and leading your eye up to that apple within this piece was very important. To the fruit, I want to touch on the fruit and the importance of the fruit within this body of work. The fruit is really an embodiment of the self. It is a direct reflection of who you are in that growth process. I think synonymously, fruit has kind of been a symbol of growth and then decay and that cycle of life. So that was really important to implement as a tool within this work. So this is pliable. This is confined. This is actually the first full body figure in color pencil that I had done. It was a little bit challenging at first, just kind of getting the hang of doing a full body in kind of a smaller aspect than I'd been used to. I'd been used to really doing the face up close and kind of personal. So you didn't have as much of the fleshy kind of small, slight changes within the skin tone. But I really enjoyed doing the full body and breaking down the muscles and the components. It is very obvious if we go back to the Sophie Rambert and her work in the figural poses. This is very much influenced by her work. The decision to not incorporate a background was kind of established at this piece. I think for me personally, when I think of memories or nostalgia, I sometimes am focused directly on that composition in my head of what is going on. And so doing that within these pieces was also very significant to that aspect of reflection and remembrance and looking at where you are now from where you have been. This is the kind of the second direct reflection of the first one, kind of that bursting out. And it's a very foreshortened pose. I really enjoyed highlighting the muscles in the back and the way that sometimes things are kind of backlit behind a shadow is very intriguing to me. I also wanted to incorporate again that useful diagonal composition. Something to point out, if you zoom in, like even the fingernails, I think sometimes details, I get so caught up on details. I'm very much a detail oriented person. And even just noticing all of those, using all of those little details to highlight a piece is very important to me. And then again, that mark making, highlighted, very shape oriented process within the plastic. So this is Burst Out, also created in September 2021. Okay, I wanted to talk about the process of how I come up with ideas and the process of like how I get the idea in my head onto paper. So I'm a person that really needs to see and physically be able to kind of manipulate my objects. I'm not one to normally sketch something idea. I think I have an idea in my head and I need to go physically manipulate an object to make that idea. I think for each photo composition of these drawings, I probably have at least 400 pictures or the lights just slightly changed or different, taken from a different angle or whatnot. But after I have taken the picture, found the lighting that I like, I throw that into Photoshop and I use that. I use the rulers to drag down and then put them into a grid. I kind of came up with this when I worked as a graphic designer for a t-shirt company, and we used the rulers as a way of measuring where the design would go on the shirt. And I was like, wow, this would be really great if I could do this within my reference photos. And then I was like, I can do that. So I've been using that a lot. And I think being able to do that digitally, create those rulers, has been such a great tool, especially when you zoom in. I'm able to zoom in and like look at these fine little areas. If you just see this, there's so much happening back there, which is hard to read from when it's zoomed out, but when it's zoomed in, you can really kind of see all of those different little lines and shapes and the ways that things that have been kind of shadowed. This is an in progress photo. You can clearly see the gridded out, and then that directly highlighted. The first thing I do within plastic is always mark out where my highlights are. If you go over them with the mid-tone, then that color pencil is kind of a little bit unforgiving in the fact that you can't get that brilliant bright white again. So this piece is exposed, and this is the finished piece of that one that I had talked about earlier. Something I want to point out about the incorporation of oranges. This was the first one that I kind of brought in, that new fruit. Oranges are really associated with richness, abundance, creativity, and expression of emotions. So I think this is kind of one of those pieces that initially started that uphill cycle of self-growth and self-identity and that creativity and that kind of coming, like quite literally coming out of your shell, with this orange being an embodiment of the self, I think is really important. And in order to have growth, you have to have both sides of that experience, especially within creativity and within art. This piece is reflection, also being with the oranges very much signifying the self. I had a little bit of a hard time with this one at first, I'm not gonna lie. I I think maybe because it was about the reflection of the self and where you've come from and where you're going and what you wanted to do, when I was drawing this piece at a time where I was just kind of starting getting into applying to grad schools, not really knowing exactly what my future would look like. I think maybe that had something to do with it personally. But also, I have learned from this piece that having the skin so highlighted and washed out has been a little bit of a challenge, because when it's so washed out, especially within very pale skin tones, there isn't that as much as that fleshy skin tone that I had talked about within that layering process that I was kind of looking for. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is Hung by a Thread, created in October 2021. This piece was the first one that I decided to kind of bring in a different material. So overall, I have three different fruits and three different materials that kind of correspond within that fruit. The red string was kind of an idea brought on by a drawing that I had done previously, which I'll be showing you next. And I enjoy the way that string is able to create such fine little shadows. You just look in here and there's these little shadows here, even cast it onto that apple. It was very nice. And I think the the incorporation of the string and the way that it held the apple together was just an intriguing composition to me. I think this is kind of the symbolic for the way that sometimes we are really kind of hanging on by a thread, quite literally, and we're putting ourselves out there, and maybe we're not always receiving all of the success that we are wanting to get. And I think that's something that everyone goes through. So this is the one that I brought in. This is the only one that I have not done from August till now. It was one that I did earlier in this year. And I think looking at this one and looking at the ones I've done now, it's very apparent in my growth, which I'm very proud to have grown so much and learned so much within this process. This one, I think, was one that was definitely initially about the self identity, especially being a clear self portrait and that vulnerability of kind of the struggle of where am I going? What am I doing? I really enjoyed doing the lips within this one. I would love to do another piece with the lips somehow being in that tensed way. This is strung out, and this one was a challenge because of that foreshortened figure for sure. I think going into it, I knew that it was going to be a little bit of a challenge, so I kind of braced myself for that. Um, this one I did decide to do the shadow in with, and I think that was because to really highlight that foreshortened way that this is foreshortened coming at us and sitting on the ground, with this coming from a ground angle instead of an aerial angle. This is one of my faves. I think I want to come back to this one sometime and do it in a larger scale, especially within being able to do the detail in the hands a little bit larger would be very nice, and the eyes. This one is strung out, created November 2021, and this is really embodying the way that sometimes we're kind of putting ourselves out there and in all of these different areas, and maybe we're just spreading ourselves too thin, and it's just we're reaching for that concept of what are we trying to get at, and in reality we're just putting ourselves out there too much. This is a progression shot, and I think you can kind of see, sorry about these progression shots also, they're a little bit washed out just because I take all the progression shots with my phone. I take a bunch of progression shots, but you can kind of see my progress in here of how I find the yellows and the blues and the purples and kind of the pinks, and then going through that. This piece, I really challenged myself to create that build up and that layering, especially within these kind of shadowed areas to create that muscle tone. This is actually my favorite piece. I had some struggles with this hand that I'll show you next. This is it kind of, this is a much closer resemblance to what it is in real life, the color. But this hand, I think I redid this hand probably 5 different times. And that is because it is so foreshortened. I think it came out quite well in the end, but it was definitely a challenge, which I always enjoy a good challenge. So that was good. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on this. You can really see where you can really see where that green plays into a part, and that's almost a mint green that I use. And then in this skin tone up here, that's really kind of fleshed out and a little bit more saturated, is almost like a salmon pink that I've used. If you even look into the eyes, I've really reflected on that idea of maturation by looking into the past and kind of seemingly like these eyes are the same as this apple and as the apple is the past self. Overall, this is definitely a piece I spent a lot of time on, and I think this pose I'd never seen before. It was really actually spent by me kind of being in the mirror and just physically manipulating what kind of poses worked and what sticks and what didn't. So this is the first thing I did after winter break, and one of my critiques that I had was to start working in different sizes. So I definitely wanted to start doing that, but I also wanted to incorporate a new fruit. So I kind of had um, this conflict of wanting to incorporate a new fruit, but not wanting all of these pears to be a different size than all of the ones I'd done previously, because then it would put more significance on those. However, this piece I do enjoy that it has that strong significance for being larger. Um, Lauren Woods came and she did an artist talk here and a workshop, and I talked to her about my work a little bit. And I think the one thing she said was it almost seems sacred like. And I think playing into that idea of intuition and this piece being larger than the other ones, this being kind of that guiding force within ourselves and that growth process, is that this is really important to be a larger piece and kind of a central piece, because it is always the backbone of who we are and where we're going. So it's 20 by 16, and I finished it in February of 2022. Okay, this piece is unearthed. I spent so much time on this piece. I probably spent the same amount of time I did on this piece as like 3 of the others combined. It was definitely a hard time, a challenge. I kind of asked myself, what would be a good challenge? And I was like, oh, tinfoil, thinking that that would be a good idea. And I was definitely right as a challenge. But it was so rewarding and satisfying in some ways. Also, a little bit of a headache, but so analyzing. Kind of zoom in a little bit. Just so many different shapes and all of the reflections within each other. And then obviously having the pear and the reflections of that kind of bright green and yellow throughout the piece of tinfoil. Something else about this piece, I've always been really into trompe-l'oeils. I think that's something that I'm wanting to do a little bit more after this, is do some trompe-l'oeils. And for those that maybe don't know, trompe-l'oeil is the trickery of the eye. It is, sometimes they are like framed in a way that makes them even more synonymous for looking like it's a box hanging on a wall or whatnot, or something pinned. So playing into that idea was really fun to do. And then I'll show you a little. So this is a close-up side by side. So on the left here, we have the actual reference photo, and then on the right is the drawing itself. And you can really see where this comes into play within these highlights and how accurate I was trying to be from the reference photo to this drawing, with also kind of incorporating that little bit of a stylized drawing and using the color pencil to its benefit. This is definitely where the grid came into play, and that zooming in, so important within this, because just constantly zooming in, zooming out, seeing what color is there and what color is maybe not there. You can even see within each of these shapes is 3 or 4 other shapes, And if we go back, this is even an area that's quite a bit larger within shapes compared to some of these other ones. This one is rumination, and the meaning of rumination is a deep or considered thought about something. I think in the beginning, I was a little bit troubled by this piece because it didn't have that strong compositional aspect, diagonal compositional aspect that I had been looking for. And I think this one kind of went in a little bit of a different direction than the other ones, which I kind of like now. I think this being the deep the deep thought, when I am working on my drawings, I think sometimes my mind like leaves my body and it is someone else taking over what I am doing because it just feels so natural in the process and that I can do it for hours. And so I think sometimes this kind of that guiding force of if you're religious or you believe in spiritual or whatnot, sometimes I think there's something else there that is deeper within us all that is kind of leading us in that direction of what we're supposed to be doing. This is Rumination, created in March 2022. This is very recent. Okay, so on working on different sizes, I was like, oh, I'm going to do a mini version, thinking that that would be easier. I was very wrong. Working very small is quite difficult. Every little tiny mark you make is very prominent, obviously, because it is so much smaller, especially doing a full body. In comparison, you can kind of see this is that larger one. These are the 14 by 11s, which is what majority of them are, and then this is that smaller one. And in this figure in whole is about the size of my phone. It's about 5 inches by like 2 or 3 inches. It's very small, and still trying to get those purples and greens was a little bit of a challenge because I still wanted that color and layer aspect that I enjoy so much within the color pencil process. But it was just a little bit more difficult getting that, especially with those hands and those feet. Very hard to do. This is entanglement. This is the last one, caged. I really wanted to do another trompe l'oeil, so this is kind of that leading up to that. I also wanted to incorporate kind of a mixture. I knew that this piece would be a piece that kind of stood off by itself, so it was important to continue that aspect in use of highlighting the tinfoil and then finding the shadows within even like where the string is casted onto like the background was really important. Zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit more. I think with the pears are very symbolic of femininity, obviously, but also kind of having that color aspect of a pear being a little bit more yellow in tone, and then that tinfoil being a little bit cooler was a good complement to each other. And then also, since this is a greenish yellow, having that red in there, so you kind of have this three different colors that are competing with each other and playing very well with each other. So this is the actual reference photo. I actually pinned this to the wall. I think my roommates were probably thinking I was insane when I was down there hammering this into the wall. But this is where the idea of physically manipulating and being able to kind of create that sculpture-like object comes in so important. I redid those strings a bunch of different times until I kind of liked where they were placed and where they were at, wrapped around that pear. And that's a process that I really enjoy, is that physical tactile way of manipulating objects into where they are. And then if you this is kind of a breakdown of that initial analyzation of that tinfoil. We have the really brilliant highlights and then the dark shadows. And then you kind of fill in between. Go back to that other one. And with the tinfoil being so tightly wound and crumpled here, there's just the mark making here was really fun to do. I kind of stopped looking at the reference for a little while and just kind of did what I thought looked right. So overall, I think this process has been wonderful. Something that I have really learned is how much work goes into preparing for an exhibition that you don't think about, especially me only starting to get into art like 3 years ago as a freshman. I had no idea how much that went into an exhibition, and the matting, the framing, the preparing the gallery space and hanging work and lighting, everything. There's so much thought put into everything. And I think that was something that I had learned throughout this entire process. And also that time management skill of this is how the real world is going to be. You're not going to, none of these works were created like in a class, they were all outside of class. So having that time management and balance between class and this is what professional life is going to be like, because it is not going to be, you're not always going to have a time set out for it during the day, but you have to make time. So I would like to invite you all to my opening reception, which is tomorrow, March 22nd from 4:30 to 6 p.m. in the Raw Gallery. Come, there'll be maybe some treats, some goodies. But overall, I'm very thankful for this process. I really want to give a special thanks to Professor Cross and Stearns. I could not have done this without them. Their guidance and mentorship for me as an artist has been monumental within my growth and my progress over this past year and the past 4 years of being here at Doane. I can't thank them enough. I truly think that they have put me in a place where professionally and educationally I will make bounds and strides within grad school and further down the line as possibly being a professor and with being a professional in the art world. So thank you.
So Emma, what is your next step?
My next step within school?
Within this whole journey, yes.
So I'm very pleased to announce that I will be continuing my education at the University of Notre Dame next fall. It is a 3-year program, and I will also have the opportunity to teach there my 2nd and 3rd year, which is a great experience to have, being that the thing that I want to go on and do within my professional career.
Can you see Olivia's comments?
Yes. Yes, I'm so looking forward this time from now till graduation in the summer going into grad school. I think I'm really interested in kind of working multimedially with maybe colored pencil and watercolor and also getting back into charcoal. So I think using those going larger would be great to do. And then also definitely using other colors of paper within that interest. I already have a composition picked out with a blue background paper and kind of this. So next, I'm really interested in going into playing on the idea of growth and self-identity is childhood and childhood memories. I think they are such a crucial part in all of us. So those are kind of two different things I'm interested in exploring within these next few months. Thanks, Olivia.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to thank Emma for taking the time for doing this. Again, if you would like to come see her show, it is open tomorrow at the Raw Gallery in Crete, Nebraska. And how long will it be up again?
The whole show will be up until Thursday. I'll probably be taking it down on Friday.
Well, thank you very much and great job.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming and viewing this.
Goodbye.